And I think there's some questions, and you and I talked about this on the phone the other day, about what has to be identified and corrected, or identified and saying, hey, we have to correct this in terms of the portal posts, whatever you want to label it as, coaching, whatever. Heading into this spring portion, if I said, Blake, you can have only one question answered, leaving the spring ball portion of the schedule, what is it for LSU and why?
Yeah, well, if it's just one for the entire team, it's offensive line, right?
Okay.
Like it's offensive line in the sense of there's a Snapchat out there of Carius Kern benching 225 39 times. Bryce, I mean, I don't do anything 39 times, right? Like, I mean, that is insane. So what do you look like in the interior offensive line? I mean, I can confirm there was a thought, Bryce, that Braylon Moore might move to guard and then DJ Chester stay at center. That's not going to work. I do think DJ Chester moves over to left guard to start, and he's about to get pushed, or he can move to right tackle. I think, Bryce, for me, considering the fact that you have a non-mobile quarterback and it's not his strength or want to pick up first downs with his legs, you got to be able to run the football in conventional ways. And when you have an A&M game where you rush for 24 yards, or you have multiple games where you rush for under 75 yards, for O-line for me is going to be the biggest thing. Now, I don't – like, I could come out here and say safety. I could come out here and say defensive line, but I don't – I'm kind of speechless of, like, in reference to what you want me to say on him. Is Tamarcus Cooley going to start at star? Well, then when Harold Perkins comes back, then what? I don't know if I get those – I don't know if I get those answers, Bryce, until August the 15th, right? Like, I don't think I'm going to get those answers until August. Offensive line's different because they're not going to go add anybody. And the core nucleus of guys that you want to use, I think there's probably 7 guys that they're going to try to utilize. All right, so who's going to win out those battles? I can start getting an answer there. But, I mean, in reference to questions that I want answered, I mean, that's a whole different topic. And I know, like you mentioned, the thing with Carter was spirited. But listen, man, I don't know if Bryce, you don't have a interior defensive line coach, and you're wanting me to come out here and not you, but like fans are on fans are on my rear end right now because they're saying I'm being too negative. Okay, so let's talk about that for just a second. I've posed this question for everybody who said I'm being too negative. You look at me and tell me in the face that you think 257.88, which I did the math, and I went to public school, so there's about a 95% chance that it's right, 5% chance that it's wrong. But I did the math myself. In all these high-profile SEC games, you're giving up 250 yards on the ground. Like, you don't have an interior defensive line coach. Do you have the personnel that can combat that? So Bryce, I don't even think that I'm going to get that answer, or we're going to get that answer until Clemson, who, by the way, can't run the football, by the way. So there comes the time where, like, there are so many questions that I have. On the offensive side, I feel like it's just more like, all right, who's going to win out? Yeah. Defensive side, my question is, do you have the dudes? So I think that the questions of me being negative, offensively, I think you're going to figure it out. It's just defensively, I'm worried. I think that I'm not being negative. I'm worried because now you're going into your 8th defensive line coach since 2000. Brian Kelly's had 4. He's never had the same more than 1 year. That's why I stick with the offensive line, because at least I know where I'm going to get, because I think it's going to be a revolving door in that interior defensive line for at least throughout the spring and at least through the fall.
You know, I like how you painted the picture of that's being negative, because I get called out a lot, and the team that I talk a lot about, both LSU on our message board and Georgia Tech here on this podcast, about, look, all we're doing is pointing out, hey, here's a reality with data to back it up. We're just simply asking the question. It's not hating. That's really what you do. That's good journalism. Hey, there's some data points here that tell you something. I've got some questions about it, and now I'm a hater and I'm a traitor and I'm not a true fan. That's I
have Georgia, Tennessee, LSU, and Alabama helmets. So apparently I'm a homer of those too. So
yeah, well, not top 8 content creator. So that's what that rolls as. But it is what it is, Blake. No, but you bring some good questions. I wanted to hit on this before we move on to the next question. Okay. Your ideal starting 5 along the offensive line. I've got some in my mind, and you kind of hinted at it. Who do you want to see, or who do you hope rises to the occasion? Who's that starting five against Clemson?
Look, I still think Tyree Adams has shown a lot. Like, I know you and I and Zach and others had conversations about like, hey, man, Tyree Adams looked good last fall, and then he gets hurt and then he moves into the interior. And so I think that he's been fine there. I think you could find him at left tackle. Look, I got to be honest with you. It's not necessarily because I've never seen the kid play in person. Bryce, the only thing I keep hearing coming out of football right now are the Ops building is Carius Kern. Oh, yeah. If what you keep pushing to me about Carius Kern, either he's going to start at left guard or you're going to rotate that position out, because I still feel like you'll have Tyree Adams, don't know at left guard, Braylon Moore, and then you're going to give Josh Thompson the deal at right guard. And then what do you do at left guard and right tackle? I think it's more to break it down in its specificity is the two position battles I think that you're really trying to figure out here, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, Weston Davis, what's up? I mean, you didn't play him in a bowl game. You didn't bring him in practices during those bowl games. You put Miles Frazier out there. Well, that tells me a lot that I needed to know about what they thought about your maturity level at that position. So, Bryce, really, it's not a whole five that I'm necessarily trying to look at, because you got your center where you're going to at least turn to. So what happens with DJ Chester? Does he move to left guard? Does he move to right tackle? I think that's going to be a big thing in day one. And then and then let's say, for example, he does move to right tackle, which I do think would be a better suit for him. Then what do you do at left guard? I don't think, Bryce, personally, that you're going to be able to keep some of these young freshmen out for long, right? I think that some of these guys are going to get beat out. Again, here's a newsflash to everybody. When you recruit at a high level, at some point you're going to hit, right? Like at some point these guys are going to come in here and hit. You literally are you're literally moving on from two guys that started as freshmen. So let's not act like that can't be a deal here. I'm really intrigued by left guard. But, Bryce, here's my ultimate thing. Guard, center, guard. You got to be better there. I mean, it's a Jaden Daniels would attack you from the outside, so it made it look like that a lot of different things had to happen in the interior. Instead of having a traditional one tech, you would move both defensive tackles to the three tech, because he did not like running right up the middle. It was a vast way of how they were doing things to try to guard him. Now people are doing more traditional things on you. So I do think that interior guard play, and by the way, I thought Paul Mabinga got better. I mean, look, Caleb Banks, for what it's worth on Ruffino and Joe show, was my highlight player of coming out of nowhere. Caleb Banks had a floor to the defensive tackle. Get ready. He doesn't have the stats. He doesn't have that. Go back and watch the Ole Miss game, the LSU game, and all these others. I thought that Paul did fine there. Now, did he give up a sack? Okay. All right. Like, I don't know what you want me to say to that, but they still were. He was still moderately good. So, Bryce, even in some depth pieces, I think that you have some experience there, and it's going to be interesting to see more in the interior for me and at right tackle what you do there.
Yeah, I've got Weston Davis listed, and I want to see Carius Kern, but I've got Weston Davis, honestly, Blake, listed as my guy to watch. Like, it does, if he makes a jump, then I feel better about that right tackle spot. Like, I feel cool about it.
Right, and Bryce, here's the good thing. Then you'd have Weston Davis, you would have DJ Chester, and I'm trying to think of who else. Maybe Callaway. I mean, maybe battling that. Maybe battling that out.
Williams, if they feel like he's moved, yeah.
I mean, you don't have a lot of option, but again, it just comes down to listen. Any kid at 18 years old, I gotta stop calling them kids, but any young adult that is benching 225 35 times, I just don't know how much he gets bullied early, right? And I don't know of anybody on this defensive line that can bully him if I'm just being blunt. So there just comes a point where, listen, when you got that, Bryce, I will give up speed in the interior for strength. You got to push dudes, right? Yeah. Like you got to move some bodies. By the way, he put on Snapchat. Carius Kern is the reason I have Snapchat now, because he keeps putting his lifts on there. He squatted 556 times, Bryce. Like he's 18. Like I can't even count to 550, much less squat it. Okay. So that's the part for me that, I mean, you hear it coming out early that he might be taking at left guard. By the way, I haven't brought up Solomon Thomas, who, you know, could you put him at left guard? Is Carius Kern at 6'5" elusive enough to play right tackle? I think that there's a lot of things that we're going to find out here. I will say this. Carius Kern reminds me of a more athletic Anthony Bradford. I think you were coming in on the beat at the end when Anthony Bradford was here. Now Anthony Bradford's a starter in the league. When you have maulers and road raiders and you're able to just keep getting those 4 or 5 yards and you can push dudes, that's when you start breaking teams. So the offensive line is very intriguing, but especially in that interior. And then how does it look with the other two, I think is a big deal. And by the way, I love Garrett to death. Really, I know people think I hate him. I love him to death. Garrett had to make calls at the end of the season and would change the calls from DJ Chester of what he saw. Braylon Moore, I do think, gives you an advantage in the interior, even in the running game, because of different calls and different formations of what you saw a season ago. So, Bryce, it's very technical, but when Garrett does not have to worry about that, it does take a lot off of his plate, which then could help open up things in the running game too.